Welcome back to the Gen Z Speaks podcast. With us today is a very interesting guest. He's a tourist. He's an author. He blogs about his daily life almost on a daily scale. You've been to about how many countries, Raymond?
81 countries.
81 countries. Wow. So he's been to 81 countries, been to all 7 continents, I'm assuming.
Yes, and I've been to North Korea.
And you've been to North Korea. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, RC Hand, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Great. Thank you very much.
So tell us about, your life. I mean, like what motivated you or inspired you to travel and be a prolific traveler that you are now?
My wife, actually, her father was born in London, and I come from a family that worked all the time. My father was a plastering contractor, and we ran a few restaurants for several years. And so I grew up working quite early. And my wife's family were partially in England, partially in America. And so when I got married to her, we traveled to England to meet her family, and we've been traveling ever since. That's what we worked for so hard, was to have enough dough to go travel once in a while.
I noticed on your website that you said that you started working when you were only 8 years old.
Yes.
Right. Can you walk us through, like, what was your day-to-day like at 8 years old? Like, how were you able to work? Because when I was 8 years old, I was just watching cricket games back in my home country in Pakistan and, flunking my classes. So I can't even imagine myself doing what you did. Yeah.
Well, my father worked on Disneyland when they built Disneyland in California as a plasterer. And then he saw his job ending, and he went to give a bid on a restaurant that was empty, and he ended up leasing it. And so I was about 6 years old at the time, and we opened this restaurant, and the whole family worked in it. I had a shoe shine box, and we swept and we loaded beer boxes, and we helped in the kitchen. I still can't wash dishes. I wash so many dishes that it makes me ill just to see a pile of dirty dishes. And all of us, my sister, my younger sister, my 2 older brothers, we all worked in the business. Anybody who has a family business knows about that.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love like stories like that where you start, family business, or you start young and then you kind of build to like your goal, and your goal is obviously to travel, right? Where was the destination that you were like, I have to go here?
Nepal.
Why is that?
Well, it's just so foreign. It had a large impact on my wife and I both. I see Western civilization, the way children are raised in Western civilization, as a little bit of a problem. Nepal and other parts of the world, children are incorporated into the family, into the working on the farm. And as I worked in the family business, I learned early that giving children responsibility makes them functioning adults. Look at the first world. We have people who never had to do anything, and at 30 can't do anything. So the evidence is there in front of us that if you work on a farm or work in a small family business, you're going to learn skills and develop the idea that you can succeed at something. If you're given everything in your entire life, how are you ever going to learn that you have to do things on your own and succeed on your own?
Absolutely. I don't know if you've heard of this. He's a clinical psychologist. His name's Jordan Peterson. But
sure.
He claims the same thing that you've claimed here, that, if you don't even give your kids chores when they're younger, that they just grow up and they're not really an active member of society, right? They're just kind of a blob, and you kind of have to wait, and eventually you learn something, right? That's just the way humans work, right? But they're definitely not as active as they should be. So what do you think it is? What do you think it is about Western civilization that we're like this?
We're spoiled. Every race of person who comes to America succeeds getting the American dream. And Americans who live here, who speak the language, are useless. They fall behind. You have people coming here from everywhere who can't speak English, who start a small business. And next generation, they're gone to UCLA, they're very successful, and on and on and on. It's obvious around us at all times what's happened to Western civilization.
For sure. I think so me and my dad talk about this actually, and it's like, there's a type of resilience, right? When you're a migrant and you're coming into the US and now you have all this opportunity and you're able to do something with your life, right? Like you weren't able to start a business. Like that's an awesome gift to be able to do. and create like a source of income for yourself rather than just relying on, you know, whatever it may be. And it just seems like there's a lot of resilience and grit in immigrants, and they just want it, right? That's what it comes down to. Who wants it more? The
And
person
that's
that's
right.
spoiled and that's been given life, or the person that's coming to start life?
And they're not afraid to fail because they can't fail. They're coming at the bottom of the rung. Their only movement is up.
And just to add to that, you know, I feel like my dad, who was an immigrant from India, he, you know, in India, you don't have the opportunities that you have in America, right? In America, there's so many opportunities for anyone to do anything, and people are not taking advantage of it. Versus in other countries, there's no opportunities and everybody is trying to find opportunities. So it's like the opposite dynamic. And that's why I think a lot of people moving to America are very successful.
Absolutely. They understand that the opportunity is there for them to take because they live somewhere where there was no opportunity.
Exactly, yeah.
I think, speaking as an immigrant myself, I've noticed that as now that I'm becoming more American, and now I'm an American citizen, I think I've started to take things for granted that when I initially moved here, I didn't. You know, like electricity. Where I'm from in Pakistan, electricity, you don't have electricity 24 hours a day. Maybe you're lucky if you get it 12 hours a day, even if you're like middle class or upper middle class. You have to like use a generator or like a UPS thing to generate electricity. You know, roads, our freeways, don't get me wrong, some of them have problems, but oh my God, have you been to the street that I grew up at? Like there's like, it seems to me there's like, you know, there's countries in the world that are decades behind the United States. And I think because we're born into it, we're born into like a very developed place. We don't truly understand what it's like not to have it.
This is why everyone should travel. I've been to the 5 stands, by
Mm.
the way. I've been to Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and so
Wow.
on. I haven't been to Pakistan. I've been to India twice. India is our favorite country. I just talked to my tuk-tuk driver today. He and I correspond monthly. I was there, I think, 2 years ago. And I have several children on my refrigerator. I have 8 children that my wife and I send to school all over the world. I have 2 children in India and a couple in Central America. And the thing that's so important, of course, is to be aware of your opportunities, to be educated so that you can take advantage of those opportunities. And Americans have no idea of what it is to live a different way unless they've traveled. That's why travel is so important. To go to Uzbekistan, you go to Uzbekistan, there's no trash on the ground because they're not buying packaged products in the stores. They're making their bread. They're making everything they eat. They make from scratch. So there's not a lot of litter. And the people have a little bit of respect for the land around them. The women are out there at 6 a.m. sweeping up whatever little bit of trash there is. And that's a nice thing to see, that people still have that closeness to their surroundings and their neighbors and to the earth. They don't produce as much garbage as the first world, obviously.
What's been, you know, what has been the most rewarding part of traveling?
Oh, meeting people, making friends. I correspond with people that I met years ago, learning all these different viewpoints. I have books written. I have a Asian folktale that I wrote. I have a book that takes place in Costa Rica. I have a book that takes place in Italy. All of those things that I saw are floating in my brain. And when I sit down to write, those bits of that travel comes in and helps to delineate where this story is going to take place. And then off I go. I write cold. I don't do outlines. I sit down with a pencil and I write a sentence and go from there.
That's awesome. I would agree. I think like I haven't traveled out of the country a whole lot. I've been to, I believe, 6 countries now. I mean, 2 of them being England and Scotland. And so I don't necessarily think it's that different. I think the big ones, me and Jenish, actually, we backpacked Thailand and Vietnam. And that was an experience. I will tell you, like, to see what they're going through. Like, there were little kids coming up, like 3 years old, coming up to us, and like their parents were sending them off to us, like to sell us stuff, to say, hey, you know, trying to speak broken English, like we're poor, bye, you know, and they see us you know, we were broke college students, right? But we took the opportunity, like we were able to do, and we did it. And you know, we gave them money, but it's just insane to see that type of even pressure from your parent. It's a different world. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. But look at the lesson they're learning.
To work hard to keep going for
Yes.
sure.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I think like that viewpoint, when I came back from Thailand, definitely changed, right? You definitely appreciate what you have here more. I called my dad when we were there, actually. I was like, wow, dad, like, it's insane that I even have the opportunity to nonetheless go out of country, but go across the world and experience a completely different culture. Like I felt so grateful for that. And then coming back to, you know, my middle-class family in college, like extremely proud that I'm able to do this, you know? I think the other aspect of traveling is to see how beautiful the earth really is. You know, a lot of people get stuck in their societies and in their little circle, and they don't go out. They don't see what the world's really about.
Right.
But, you know,
They
God's
parrot
made a
what-
beautiful place.
They parrot what people tell them. They don't understand how large the world really is. And they haven't had the opportunity perhaps, or taken the time to go out and really see it for themselves, because you have to see it for yourself. Going to India is a mind-altering experience. If you come from America, and it's a great experience. People either love India or they hate India. There's no, oh, well, maybe I like it a little bit. It's either you love it or you hate it. And it's just a hectic, busy, crazy place. And that's why it's so interesting. And Nepal is similar on a smaller scale. But my wife and I watch a lot of foreign films also. So we've seen the stories, we see how their stories are formulated. They have a different beginning point for movies, where we might have a high-speed automobile chase in an American movie. A country in Africa that makes movies, it wouldn't necessarily start with a high-speed chase. It might be an animal attacking another animal. It depends on your environment as to what your movies talk about. And again, how many people are there in other countries? India is a perfect example with Bollywood, with these people who are equally as famous in India as any of our actors in America, but no one in America knows who they are and could care less. And they think that the Academy Awards is everything when it's just an award given in America. It's silly.
Yeah, no, there's definitely different cultural, you know, just differences in general, and people kind of have a hard time understanding those. By the way, in India, I'm from Gujarat. Have you been to Gujarat?
Oh, you know, I've been to Delhi. I've been to the Stepwell. I've been out to see the tigers. I've been to the Taj Mahal.
Okay.
I've been all over, but to tell you where I've been is hard off the top of my hat.
Oh, no,
And
no worries.
we're going back also. It's such a big place. You have to go 5 or 6 times to really touch and see what it's really about.
No, yeah, definitely. I agree. No, I have, you know, even though I'm Indian and I was born in India, I moved here at a young age. I still haven't seen the Taj Mahal. So, you know, I'm expecting to do that soon too, hopefully when I go back. So,
well, my background is in construction. I was a plasterer and a builder. My father and I built small apartment buildings. So I appreciate architecture and those buildings that are so dynamic and interesting and different and huge and beautiful. Where maybe other people don't appreciate that. I understand what it takes to build something like that. It's not a task to be started lightly.
Definitely, yeah.
How was the architecture in North Korea?
Interesting. So if you've ever been to Long Beach,
yeah,
and you see the apartment buildings that are maybe 4 and 5 stories tall, that's basically what people in North Korea live in Pyongyang, which is the show city where most tourists are allowed to go. I'm sure there are villages out that are smaller. What I could see mostly looked like collective apartment living. I must say, we lived in it. We went to a hotel in a city that we went to, and it looked like someone had been to Las Vegas and came back with the idea to build a hotel that looked just like a Las Vegas casino. And that's what it was. It looked like a Las Vegas casino. And the carpeting was laid on the floor. It was about 2 inches bigger than the room. It wasn't tacked down. It was just tossed in there. The bathroom was a modular fiberglass molded piece with round corners. And it looked like the whole room looked like a fiberglass bathtub. It was all molded in one piece and brought in and set in place, and the walls were put up around it. So
did it just feel like a big show that they're just trying to show you something, which is
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's what Havana is the same way. When you go to Havana, there's certain streets that the tourists go on where the buildings have been painted. You go off the street or look to the right or left, you'll see buildings that haven't been painted in 100 years. And Pyongyang is the same way. And in Pyongyang, when we arrived from the airport, the lights went out at sundown in half the city because they don't have enough oil to run the generators all the time. And as the lights went off, immediately half the city had candle lights in every window of every apartment building, and they were lit almost simultaneously. And you're looking like at a sky full of stars on one half of the city, and the other half of the city is lit. It's incredible.
Wow, that is incredible.
Yeah.
How did the people look at you? Since you, I mean, they can tell you're Westerner, right? How were they looking at you a certain way, or was it a trip?
Well, I have to tell you a funny story. Because I was in construction, I noticed everything about buildings. When I was in China, my son was 15. He came with us and he had a size 13 shoe. So all of the Chinese tourists were taking pictures of my son's feet because he had big feet, but he was only 5'8" tall. But that to them was really interesting. So these are the things that you notice when you travel. When we were in, we obviously have Western clothing. When we were in India, the first time we were riding rickshaws through the districts where they do steel trunks. You know how the city is divided up in those little sections where the different types of craftsmanship are being done. The crafts are being done. We would drive down the road and people would come out of their shops and wave their hands at us and yell at us, "We love America, we love America." And that's interesting and wonderful to see, because if you listen to American media, everyone hates us. If you believe what the media tells us, we're vile and hated creatures. And in reality, we've done a great deal to help our brethren around the world, and sometimes it works to our detriment.
Interesting. I want to go back. I want to quickly go back to North Korea. How did that happen? Because can anyone?
How does that process go about?
Yeah, like
it's open to most anybody. There are no restrictions against traveling to North Korea and the United States that I'm aware of. You you can look at the United States diplomatic information on travel advisories. We're going to Iran in 23. And I've been communicating on LinkedIn with the man who lives there, who's been warning me not to come because there are Americans in prison in Iran right now. But there are several organized groups that travel there. My wife wanted to see North Korea. We wanted to see the communist countries before they all collapsed. So we made an effort to go to Cuba, to Russia, to North Korea, and as many communist countries as we could find. And we went to the Eastern Europe, to Czechoslovakia, and those countries that were former communist bloc countries to see. And we went to Germany when there was still East Germany. We also went to Germany after the wall came down to see the difference. So it's important to see what communism does for people, because of course in America this is an unknown, and everyone that are under 30 think communism is the golden fleece and the answer to all problems. And of course it is, until the wealthy people are all killed and there's no money left, like what happened in China during the Cultural Revolution. But no one remembers the Cultural Revolution. It happened too long ago for anyone under 30 to remember it.
Socialism is definitely coming about, and it's underestimated, right? I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan, and he talks about it all the time, how socialism is nothing to play around about. Like it's not a joke, and there's a lot of detriment that's happened in this world, and people fail to realize history's real, right?
Oh, absolutely. Think about the people who lived in the Soviet Union for the last 60 years and kept waiting for the promises of socialism in line for bread. I read.
Very sad.
Are you familiar with Malcolm Gladwell?
No, I'm not.
He wrote The Tipping Point, Outliers, What the Dog Knows.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I am aware.
David and Goliath. Read
For
those.
sure.
Excellent books. And also, geography is a very important thing about the success and failures of a country. Most successful countries have a thriving city within 5 or 6 miles inland from the ocean on a major river. Africa has none of that. Africa has two major seaports, one in the south, at the Cape, and one at the north in, well, it used to be Alexandria, but now it's Cairo. And Africa is a large bluff. There are no mountains that gather snow to feed rivers that run year round. The rivers run too steep and are too rough to be navigated. So the country is hampered by its geography. Everything that moves in the country has to be moved by truck, which is expensive. They only have rain during the monsoon season. They don't have different temperate zones for year-round weather for growing crops. They have probably the worst set of geographic circumstances for their population to survive. And yet, if you ask anyone, they'll say the West is responsible for the failure of Africa. It's really geography. Just do a little studying, look at different countries, why they're successful, and look at their geography.
I want to go back to you traveling to North Korea. Like how, now that you've told me that it's accessible to most Americans, I still don't think I would travel. And I know your wife and yourself were curious about different communist countries, but like, how did you overcome your fear of because I'm sure you were hesitant in the first place to go to a country like that.
What's the worst thing that can happen?
You can end up in prison. You can be.
Well, that's not the worst thing. You could be dead.
Yeah.
You could be killed.
True. Right.
If you're killed, nothing matters after that. And so if you go to prison, when you get out, you can write a story about it. I like fish. I like rice. I eat anything. My wife's a little more particular. I'm overweight. I was overweight before. You go to prison, you lose some weight, and maybe you learn a language. Maybe you go to North Korea, you learn to speak Korean, and you lose 30 pounds if you survive. And you have a heck of a story to tell once you get out of there, if you ever do. I will say this, you follow the rules, you will be okay. We had guides on the buses who watch us. It was interesting because they're reading your dossier the whole time you're on the bus. You're not allowed to take photographs of any military installations while you're on the bus. We worked around that a little bit. My wife's very clever. So on our trip, there were 13 people. One was maybe 15 people. One was a Los Angeles Times female correspondent. There were several historians that you would, if you looked in the book of who's who, you would probably know that as very successful historians and writers. There was my wife who worked in a supermarket and myself who was a plasterer. And they wondered just what the heck are these two people coming to North Korea for? Well, we want to learn something. We went to the Pueblo. Remember the Pueblo?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you made a conscious decision that, God forbid, if my wife and I end up in prison, it's fine. Like the worst that can happen is.
How else can you go? You can't go there worrying and then be aware of what's around you. You have to go there. And I have to tell you, we went to a bookstore and I looked at the bookstore and I could see in the wall that they'd remodeled the wall. There'd been an arch in that wall to another room. And I could see that they'd closed it off and put a doorway instead. And I said to the guide, I said, this room has been remodeled. They've put a partition up in this room that wasn't here originally. And he said this to the woman behind the counter in Korean. And she said, has he been here before? No, but I'm an observant person.
Right.
And I have to tell you, we bought some interesting books there. One was called My Escape from South Korea, which is Russian propaganda. And it's really interesting. It talks about how in North Korea, there's free education and everyone can go to college. And in South Korea, everybody has to work and you have to pay your own way through college. What does that sound like? Does that sound familiar to you? It sounds kind of like America to me.
Interesting.
Yes, I was in England twice last month for a wedding and a 90th birthday party. My wife has a lot of family there. And everyone tells me they have free health insurance. No, you do not. You pay for it out of your income taxes. It's not free, it's prepaid. So there's no such thing as free medical care. They take it out of your pay. And in Sweden is a democratic republic. It has a capitalistic system. It has a socialized medical system. Sweden has a population of 5 million people. That's like LA. That's easy to take care of 5 million people. Taking care of 300 million people is a little harder.
For sure. So, okay, I have a rebuttal to that though. So how do you think our tax system works? Like, do you like it or what do you think?
Well, first of all, a lot of people from Canada come to the United States to have medical procedures because there's so many people waiting in line you can't get taken care of. Likewise in England, they don't have enough facilities because there's not enough money. Every time I fly back from England, there are English doctors coming to America looking for jobs because they don't get paid very much. As far as our tax structure, I'm not an expert on that, but let me say this. Our companies have left America to work overseas and have taken those jobs away because our government overtaxed their income. I don't care if you tax any company, anything. Their employees will pay income tax because they're getting paid a wage. That generates money for the federal government. If you ask someone in the government how much someone should pay, they don't know. It's just always never enough. So they make us into tax cheats. Those laws are passed by our politicians. If we abide by those laws, that's what we're doing. And we struggle with those laws, but those laws were created for special interest groups. You hear people talk about special interest groups. All those laws are created for special interest groups. I would like to see the corporate income tax brought down lower to bring back American companies back to America to employ Americans. And right now in England, I believe it's Google has closed all their offices in England and moved everything to Ireland because the taxes are lower. The Beatles left England because the taxes were high. You get to a point where you raise the taxes, the wealthy people leave and take their money with them, and you're left with a poor country. Somewhere is a balance.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm under a similar impression. Look, I think, so I have no problem. I'm not anti-tax by any means, right? Because if you don't have taxes, you don't have society, right? But the whole thing with the United States, at least, I mean, every country's like this, there's corruption everywhere, right? But it's like, where do we allocate our taxes? That's not exactly told to us. You know what I mean? Like sure. Italy, for example, Greece, Sweden as well. They tell you like by dollar amount, like this amount of dollars going here and here. They just tell us like, hey, we have gas taxes, and because of these gas taxes, it's going to help our infrastructure. Okay, so what happens about our state tax as well? That's infrastructure. That's also roads. And so it's like everybody puts in this money, but in reality, not much gets done. You're in Orange County, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this on the 5 freeway here. I mean, the 5 freeway is absolutely.
Can you see out my
terrible.
window?
Yep. No, not quite.
Well, I live in a harbor. I live in a boat harbor.
Oh, okay, nice. Where about?
In North Huntington Beach, right before you go into Long Beach.
Oh, awesome. Okay, my mom lives in Huntington Beach. Do you know where Bella Terra is?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, she lives right there. So like you've seen the 5 freeway, right? Like how long has it been under construction? Like 10, 12 years now? Like at least I'm 21, right? So that's how I remember it.
I would say about 40 years.
Right. So, but the 105 freeway, when the 105 freeway was built, how quick was that built? That was relatively quick, right? That was about 12 years of actual construction. Aside from, buying the houses and all of that, government encroachment, it's just the whole thing. It just more greed and more greed gets to us. And that's it's just becoming a cycle, I believe.
Let me say something. I was always self-employed. I don't have to work anymore. I have sent out 16,000 emails on LinkedIn it's my job. I spend 3 or 4 hours a day on LinkedIn. I and my wife discussed how we wanted to live before we were married. And we had a plan on what we would have to do to live that way. No one formulates a plan anymore. This is what we're talking about adult people. Adolescents don't have plans, adults do. So my wife and I decided, since she had a retirement plan from the Retail Clerks Union, she was set in her retirement plan. I was self-employed, had no retirement plan. So we worked and struggled and bought real estate. We have a few little pieces of property that give us some income. A lot of my clients were had that same kind of mindset and bought real estate. So when they retired, they would have an income. The government will do nothing for you. You will pay more for their services, and their services will be crappy. You have to take care of yourself. Don't ever forget that.
Self-serving, right?
You have to take care of yourself. And it's a good thing, because once you become middle class, even we could say comfortable, then you have the ability to help other people. If you're poor, you can't help anyone else. If you become successful, then you can help other people. This is what drives me crazy about people who hate wealthy people. First of all, the number of people that inherit wealth is less than 2%. It's next to nothing. No one ever talks about that. Most people who are wealthy earned it through working in small businesses. And when you become relatively comfortable, that's when you have the opportunity to help people who have less, along with creating jobs for people your whole working career. I had 1 or 2 people work for me for 40 years. Those, but not the same 2 people. I had about 35 different employees over 38 years, but they all learned to trade. They all made money working for me, were able to take care of their families. And they had a choice then, after working with me for a few years, to open up their own business. You can open up the business I had for $500. It doesn't require a great investment. It requires a determination to go to work 6 days a week and answer the phone all night long when you're at home, and not ever see a television program all the way through, and not eat a meal without your phone ringing. Every time that phone rang, it was $150 for me. You can bet I answered that phone.
Yeah, I think the idea of helping yourself before helping others is definitely a reality. I kind of want to go back to a point you were talking about a while ago, but I found it really interesting. You said that the media, the media in the United States is portraying United States to be some sort of a bad country, you know, which is not a good country. And I find that absolutely ridiculous, because I feel like America is one of the only countries in the world where everyone's kind of learning to live together, no matter the race or whatever, right? No matter
You're
race,
absolutely
age,
right.
right? And like the example I always think about, right, is let's say you're a white American male, right? And you go to Japan. You can go live in Japan for 40 years. You can get citizenship. You can have a business there. You still won't be treated as a Japanese person.
You're absolutely right.
But in America, if you come here, I've been in America for about 12 or 14 years now, and I would be considered American by everyone, because that's how America is.
This is the great and wonderful thing about our country. It's very rare in the world. Of course, other countries in the world have immigrants, but they're usually there as escaping from another country. America has immigrants who come voluntarily to make a life for themselves. And that's the difference. And the other issue is that I have no axe to grind with people coming to America, because all they do is bring in different ideas from their cultures, and they have a thirst for knowledge, and they have a thirst for success. And all that does is drive the country's economy and improves the country.
I mean,
it's obvious.
Right. Immigrants help a lot. But I think, to be fair, though, it took us quite a long time to get to a point that we are now, and we still have ways to improve. You know, like we weren't this welcoming always to immigrants.
I agree with you.
It's like it took us about 200 plus years to get to where we are now. And
but you have to put that into context with the rest of the world. The rest of the world wasn't any better. So this is how humans lived. Humans were not very educated in the sense of helping their brother. Even though the Bible existed, most people don't follow the tenets of the Bible. And as we become more wealthy and more secure, then we're able to allow other people to come and join us. It's the first people who are picked on when the economy turns are the immigrants, because they've taken American jobs. That's the first thing you're going to hear as the economy gets more and more difficult. And part of that's true, but at the same time, they bring so much to the country. And I'll leave it at that. I welcome it.
Yeah, Ibrahim, I feel like that's a common misconception. I feel like since we live in an age of information and things flow so much, that it's a lot easier for things to change now. Before, you had everybody, I mean, including yourself, I'm sure, if you were to be here in the 50s, you would be a thought of society, right? And how society is right now, we're very thought-provoking and we're very open and free to new ideas. But the vast majority of people back then, they weren't okay with it. You know what I mean? So it's not like it was everybody's fault. It's just
that doesn't make it right
was.
still.
No,
but it's just
I
how
have
the
to
world
tell you,
was.
I was here in the 50s, and I grew up in a Mexican community because my parents had a Mexican restaurant. When I go into Carl's, people speak to me in Spanish first because they think I'm a Mexican. I have a real warm spot in my heart for Mexicans. They're the hardest working people on the planet, almost as hard as working as Indians and Pakistanis. But and sometimes you can't tell them apart. How many times have you guys been talked to in Spanish? And I look at it. I look at it as a badge of honor. So I was very lucky to grow up I was the outcast in my neighborhood. There was 3 white people. I mean, Hispanics or Caucasian also. But my father, my mother, myself, and our siblings, we're the only white people in the whole Mexican neighborhood. And I learned Spanish. My father spoke Spanish, and all my workers were Mexican because they are very hardworking people. You can't find my son wouldn't want to work with me full time. I can't find guys who look like me, white guys who wanted to work as hard as I worked. I'm the last of the Mohicans, so to speak. But I was so lucky to grow up in an environment where my dad and my mom dealt with non-lookalike people. We had Tina Turner perform at our restaurant when they first started out. So we had Black people coming. We had Japanese farmers around us. So we had Japanese people coming to eat and drink and get drunk in our bar. And we had Mexicans, and we had a few brave, it's like me going to North Korea. We had some white people coming to our restaurant. They were very brave souls, because the police didn't come to our restaurant and bar very often because it was on the edge of the outskirts of town and it was pretty rough.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say the only point I was really just trying to make for that whole argument was that, people say America is racist, America is this, but if you really look at the world, and this is from my perspective, I might be wrong, you can challenge me on this, but from like my experience in Asia and stuff, it is way worse in Asia and other countries than it is in America. America
Absolutely.
is actually way more inclusive and way more acceptive of different races and ethnicities and different points of views than other countries.
Absolutely. And it's not perfect, but we do a darn better job than other countries. You're absolutely right.
That's what it is. You have to compare, right? Because if you don't compare, then you just get stuck in a bubble. And when you're stuck in the bubble, you don't see anything else that's going on.
That's right.
So in the 50s, and you grew up, so I'm half Mexican. How did the Mexicans look at you, since you were the only one there?
They treated me great. They called me Wedo, white boy.
White boy, yeah.
Yeah, blondie. And I would go to 3 or 4 houses every morning for breakfast, and they'd feed me like one of their kids. And
beautiful.
I have to tell you, they're the most gracious, warm people. And I can't say enough about them. And it was so wonderful because I worked in Santa Ana and most of Orange County, and I worked in apartments for mostly poor people. And I would speak Spanish to these people, and they couldn't believe it. And a lot of them were shy and didn't want to speak English to me because it wasn't perfect. Well, my Spanish isn't perfect, but I can't be embarrassed. So I'm going to learn something from you. I'm going to learn a new word. And I'm going to try to speak your language because that's a sign of respect. And I lived my life that way. I worked my business that way. I became very successful because I treated people like my friends. I considered all my customers my friends.
Kind of getting back to traveling, I wanted to ask you, what's been your worst experience traveling, or the worst part of traveling?
Well, I don't like to fly, and I don't drink. So that could be a little bit of a problem. But I do it because I know the reward and the chances of getting killed is slim, and the rewards are going to be great. We had an airline strike in Australia, and it changed our trip to some degree. It made it more difficult. We saw everything we were going to see. I've never been robbed. I've had people come off the street and help me when I looked like I was lost. I've never had a negative experience that I can remember. I think I have friends who've had negative experiences traveling. And I think that if you put out a certain vibe, you get what you put out. And I may be full of baloney, but you guys probably experience the same thing. If you go through the world with a chip on your shoulder, you're going to people trying to knock it off. If you go through the world trying to learn something from somebody, you're going to have I think a good experience.
There's always going to be bad people in the world. There's always going to be people that, whatever it is. We had one experience in Thailand, and I'm not like a passive person. If it's something being disrespected, I go ahead and, voice my opinion on it. And we're there, and we actually rented, so do you remember that, Jenish, in Krabi?
Yeah.
We rented some mopeds. And we rented some mopeds, and the guy, you know how Thailand weather is. It's on and off. It's sunny, and then immediately it just starts pouring rain. And, we're tourists. We don't know. And so we rented two mopeds, and we're going up to the temple. And like we were going, and all of a sudden it just started pouring. And so we literally turned back. It was like 5 minutes in. And I told the guy, honestly, like it wasn't about the money. So it was what, $7 for a day. Like it's not about that. Like we're actually going to go the next day anyway. But I ended up going back, and we're like, hey, is it cool? You know, we'll come back tomorrow. Can you just refund us for it? And we'll come back tomorrow. And he just started being extremely disrespectful to me. And like the general consensus with Thailand is that the people are genuine. They're lovely. But there are people like that, right? That they just, you know, maybe he was having a bad day, and maybe maybe I should have just given up the $7 and it wasn't worth the argument. But, you know, it is what it is. That's been my only, I think, negative experience.
I worked for 38 years. I worked in probably 200,000 apartments over and over again. And I had a couple of experiences where people were threatening me or were rude to me. And one of them, after he left and asked me to move my truck in not a very polite way, I thought about getting revenge on him some way. I was probably 25 or 28 years old. And I thought, well, you know, I'll put some plaster in his gas tank. He's a big jerk, you know, whatever. And then it dawned on me, and he came back. Well, it didn't dawn on me. He came back an hour or so later and apologized. And he had a story about what had happened to him. And his daughter was sick. They had gone out in the middle of the night to the hospital. Someone had blocked them on the road. They were driving fast, and someone wouldn't let them pass. And so he had all this stuff going on. His daughter's in the hospital, and he's under this duress. And then I took and parked in his parking space, and it upset him. And so he took out his frustrations on me. The lesson to be learned is that when people do this to you, there's usually a good reason, or a reason. It may not be a good reason, but there may be a long-standing reason. Maybe, and I'm the first one not to give people a pass when they hurt other people. But if someone is rude to you and they're not physically violent to you, it's possible that they're just having, like you said, a bad moment, and they could be wonderful tomorrow. However, it's you with them now. And that's your experience with them. And it sticks in your craw sometimes. I get that completely. I take things very personally. I'm sure you guys do too. We all do.
Yeah. Everything happens. So, okay. So we're 21. RC, where do you think is the most beneficial place for us to visit right now as a 21-year-old?
I would say Nepal. I think that they have any agrarian society. You could go to South America, you go to Mexico, but I think living in an agrarian society where children are able to work with the family in the fields and be really helpful and learn that trade. It's a very important trade. Here's a dirty little secret. How many people go to college and how many people work blue collar in America? The mantra is go to college, go to college, go to college. Well, who's going to fix your toilet? Who's going to paint your house? So we hear this college stuff all the time. I went to college. I have a 2-year degree in the administration of criminal justice. I was going to go to law school. I never wanted to wear a tie that bad to be a lawyer. And I made a really good living. I made around $100,000 a year for 25 years. You know, and I own a few pieces of property. I live a very nice life. I didn't go to college, and I couldn't get fired. I worked 6 days a week for 38 years. No one could give me a pink slip and tell me you're done, get out of here, pack your gear. No one told me that. I got up every morning and I took care of business. And every time that phone rang, I knew it was $150 and I'm going to go get that money. I'm going to treat somebody nice. I'm going to meet somebody. I'm going to learn something from them. I used to tell people the reason for that hole in your wall is for me to get in and talk to you. Because that's who I am. I'm a listening and talking guy. And I got to go into all these people's homes to do some little stinking repair to make my living. But I got to listen to their life story and learn something from them. I learned something from everybody I ever meet. And I think if you go through life that way, you can't help but have a positive experience.
That's so admirable. Yeah. I mean, we have so much to learn from everyone. Like even people where we least expect it from, knowledge just comes in if you're looking for it.
Absolutely. And there's so much knowledge out there. You'll never gain all of it in 10 lifetimes. It's incredible. I read a couple of books all the time, and I've written 9 novels, and I can't even scratch the surface of what the heck's going on. So right now I have this book up. I'm looking at it while I was waiting for you. It's Edgar Allan Poe. Do you know what happened to Edgar Allan Poe? How he died?
It was a very tragic death, right?
Well,
I mean, it was.
and it's very interesting in this time that we live in now. In his time, they used to hire people to vote. And they would pay people to change clothes. They'd go in a saloon, they get alcohol, they get a change of clothes, and they'd go out and vote. And then they do it all over again because the elections were all fixed. Edgar Allan Poe was found dead in someone else's clothing. He had no money. He wasn't financially successful. Some people believed that he was voting illegally to gain money to live on.
Interesting.
And when he was found in someone else's clothing. So I
His
didn't know
work
that.
lives on. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's the only
and,
thing that
and,
lives on.
and indeed it does. Mine may not, but his does. But I mean, this,
You never know. You
you
never
never know. It lives on here.
I do want to ask you, you said you worked 6 days a week for 38 years, right?
Yes.
How'd you do that? Like, to me as a 21-year-old, that's like, whoa, that's, to me, sounds like you put in a lot of work and dedication. So like, walk me through your day to day. Like, how did you just take it one day at a time? Because 38 years, 6 days a week is a long, long time.
It's your responsibility to take care of your family. And I had a certain level that I wanted to take care of my family. And I had customers who depended on me to be there and do a job. And I worked in the rental industry. So when an apartment goes vacant, it turns over in 3 days. And I'm the first person that has to be there before the painter can come in and paint, before the carpet can be put in. And if I promise someone that I'm going to be there, if I don't get there, they lose money and they can't turn that apartment. And my wife and I talked about how we wanted to live after we were retired. And it was very difficult I didn't work because I wanted to. I worked because I had to. I had 6 mortgages most of my working life because I had rental properties. And so I had to do $12,000 a month just to cover my mortgages if they were vacant. So some months I'd make $20,000 in a month. Some months I wouldn't make nearly that much. I never knew from one day to the other how much money I would make. So we had to live very close to the vest and not spend money we didn't have. We spent money to travel. I traveled throughout my working career. That was important to us. How old, look at me. I'm a pretty good specimen. I play tennis every day. I played handball this morning. I played 3 sets of tennis this afternoon. I play handball tomorrow morning at sunup. I'm 70 years old. And I'm very physically fit because of the work that I did. That's one of the ways I looked at my job, was a way of staying fit. And I got a satisfaction, an artistic satisfaction out of my craft. I got a social satisfaction out of meeting people. You can make life and work terrible, or you can make it wonderful. That's your choice. If you tell yourself you love your work, and eventually you will. If you tell yourself you hate your work, you will. And don't ever go to work for money. Go to work for the pleasure of the job. The money will follow.
That's brilliant. Yeah. So you said something that you said you did it because you had responsibility, right? And I feel like in our generation, there's like a lack of responsibility. Like we're Gen Z, but in the millennial generation, nobody's buying houses, nobody's starting families because they don't want that responsibility. They don't want that feeling of being tied down, right? But that's life. Like, that's reality. Buying a home, having something that's yours, like, in my opinion, that's something to be proud of, right? To have a family, like, that's yours. Like, you're on this earth, and that's something to really be proud of.
This is what's happening around the world, in Italy, in France, in Japan. There's the whole world is suffering a lack of births. We're running out of people. People aren't getting married in Italy and France. In America, in America, there's more births out of wedlock than in wedlock. And nothing destroys the American dream faster than someone not getting married and being responsible for a family. The easiest and most surefire way to remain in poverty is to be a female and get pregnant without a husband. And people are doing it left and right. That's a big hole to dig out of.
Yeah, it's becoming like an epidemic, right?
Absolutely.
We call it hookup culture. That's what we call it right now. And so it's like, there's no value really in starting a family, or like being, disciplined, I guess, in your way too. People just want to have fun. They want to have fun. They want to go out, and that's just it.
Fun is great. Fun is great until you're 70 and have no place to live and can't eat. Try that on for size.
True.
Hmm.
We're all going to be older one day.
That's right. If you're
People don't
lucky.
realize that. Yeah.
If
If
you're lucky.
exactly, if we're lucky. Yeah.
Yeah.
But how do we prep? You have to work hard.
I have friends my age who will have to leave California because they don't have enough money to live on when they retire. And
That's brutal.
That's just the way that it is. And I worked for those 38 years. I paid off all my properties. I don't have any debt. I don't use credit cards. If I do, I pay them off that month. We don't carry a balance. I pay cash for my cars. But I'm fortunate. But luck comes from planning. You don't become lucky by going out every day without a plan. You become lucky because you work your plan. My plan was to go to work every day. I had to make $600 a day. That was my plan. I did 3 jobs in the morning, had lunch, always took my lunch to work. When you buy lunch, that adds up to a car payment every month. Don't buy lunch. Take your lunch with you. And so I would do 6 jobs a day. My average job took 55 minutes completed. And I know these things because I had a plan. And I would do $600 a day or more to make my plan work. And after I did my 600, then I'm on speed control. My wife is happy, I'm happy. And then good things roll after that. If the day is only, if it's 3 o'clock, you got 3 more hours to work. In the summertime, you work until the sun goes down. That's 7:30 or 8. I grew up working with my dad at 8 o'clock at night outside when the sun was up. It's all about how you train yourself and how you train your children. We've trained our children not to do very much and to expect everything to be given to them. Is it a surprise that that's who they become? No, it's no surprise. It's a foregone conclusion.
And, you know,
Yeah, we're a product of our environment.
Absolutely.
if you were 21 years old, right, like 49 years ago approximately, what advice would you give your 21-year-old self? Like, do you have some things that you would change, like some things you look back on, like, I would have done that differently, or any advice you would give your 21-year-old self?
Well, I have to tell you, I did a podcast the other day, and it was about alcohol and drug dependency. And one of the things that I would tell a 21-year-old is that your life will be just so much better than you can ever imagine it's going to be. If you do the right things. You can't imagine how great your life is going to be if you do a few simple things. And that includes putting a little bit of money aside every month when you're working. And you don't have to keep the same job. Go to school at night if you can. I went to school at night for 6 years to get a 2-year stinking AA degree, which I've never used, but I learned a lot of things. Read, learn, and I don't know if you saw it on my website. I have it on there all the time. It's be nice to each other. That's important. Right. I went to work and I went to bed when I came home knowing that I had fulfilled my obligations to my customers. I didn't have to hide from the telephone like a lot of guys do. I worked for contractors that were here and gone in 2 years because they were shysters and crooks. Charge a decent price for your services. Treat people fairly. You can't help but be a success. It's a simple equation.
For sure. So I have another travel question, actually. Have you been to Brazil or Venezuela?
Yes. I had not been to Venezuela. I would like to because it's really interesting right now, I think.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I might have to bring my own food with me, though.
Yeah. How did you go into the favelas by chance in Brazil?
No, we do organized tours.
Okay.
And I've been to Brazil twice. I went for Carnival for my
nice.
For my 25th anniversary, I believe. It might have been later than that, and that was wonderful. And because I speak Spanish and I was surrounded by people from all over Latin America, I got to talk to a lot of people, and that was wonderful. We stayed at the beach. We stayed at the Copacabana Hotel, which is a very famous, expensive hotel at Ipanema, and we took some tours. We had a wonderful time. We went up the Amazon. Let me tell you, when I went, it was during the Y2K problem. There were 2 people on our trip to Peru. And when we went down the Amazon, when we went to Brazil, there were 10 people on the entire ship, a giant cruise ship, 10 people, because everyone was afraid that the computers were going to break down during Y2K. We had a couple from France, we had a couple from Spain, we had a couple from England, we had a couple from America. And The Italian spoke Spanish. The girl from France spoke a little Spanish. We were able to all communicate at the table and translate and have a great time. And it was wonderful, wonderful. I have a book written called Dreams of Costa Rica, which is a fictionalized version of my uncle's life in Costa Rica. He went to live there and never came back in about 1938. And he was there during the revolution in Costa Rica. They had a short revolution of like 38 days or something. And so I write a really interesting story about that. It's he meets the richest man in Costa Rica who wants him to do him some favors. And we'll leave it at that. It's a fun book. It's well worth reading.
How do you say you write just cold write, you don't outline, right?
That's
and for
right.
me as a writer, I have tried it. It works sometimes, but for me, outlines are super helpful at times. So how do you just cold write?
Well, I create an outline after I create the characters and start the story. So I can
So
keep
you do
track
have an
of-
outline.
I keep it. I don't use the outline to build the story. The story builds itself. Someone talks to me in my head, I guess, and I get this information. It's hard, it's hard to explain how that process works.
No, I get you.
It's
Do you write to
inexplainable.
music at all? Like soundtracks? Do you ever like write to music?
No, I have to have silence. I can't sleep with music. I have to
Really?
have silence. But
Interesting.
I create outlines to dictate and to show where the story is moving and who's related to who, because my stories are very much character driven with action. They're not action stories, because the stuff happening inside the people's brains is much more interesting than what's happening out in the outside world. The relationships between people, people under stress, those relationships, how they develop, how they fracture, those things are what's interesting for me. And there's war, there's danger, those things are there as elements also, but that's a backdrop to the human experience and how they react to each other and those events. I have a spy thriller that I wrote called Grandpa Ernie's Secrets, takes place in Italy. I'm a quirky person, so I write quirky stories. We're all individuals. We all have a different way of telling a story. I don't know if you noticed, did you see that I won the greatest storyteller event in Long Beach?
Wow.
Yeah, I saw
didn't
that.
know.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That is
so
awesome. That says something.
So I did that. I did a second one a couple of nights ago, and I didn't win, but boy, there were some great storytellers. And listening to other people tell stories and listening to interesting things on television. I wrote a story. I was in Iceland on a cruise ship, and I saw a story about the Fabergé eggs. So that little bit of information gave me an idea to write a story about a millionaire who builds his house in California to ship his best artwork to keep it safe from the elements of bad weather on the East Coast. And the story takes place before and after California becomes a state. But the characters involved are really the important stories. It involves a house that may or may not be haunted. It involves true characters from the West doing things that maybe they didn't do. But it's all brought by little bits of information that comes your way, and then it triggers something in your brain.
Other than your own novels, do you have some favorite novels that from other authors that you really, really like?
Well, I like Ends of the Earth, stories about the Middle Ages. I'm reading a book right now, which is crazy, about a true crime story where an innocent man gets convicted of a crime. I'm reading a book about the Jesuits right now, which is very interesting. The Jesuits are highly motivated by socialism. They've actually fought with the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. They believe in giving all the wealth to the masses. And of course, we know how that all turns out. As you take the money away from the masses, there's no money left, because there are certain people on this planet who, if you gave everybody $1 million in a year or two, one person would have $100 million and everybody else would be broke, because they don't have the knowledge or the skills to handle money. Why do you think you've had the most people on this planet are poor for the history of the planet? Why is that? It's no accident. It's the way people are. We don't plan long term. We don't have that
Human
skill.
nature.
I'm sorry.
It's human nature. We want instant gratification, right? We want it now.
That's right.
And,
That's right. And you can't blame the first world for the problems of the entire world. The first world has escaped those problems through education. And that is the most important thing you can do. That's why my wife and I support 8 children around the world in school, so that they can be educated. And I say, bring all the immigrants to America. Let's educate them. Then hopefully some of them will go back to where they came from and improve their countries. That's what we need to have happen. Money handed out to foreign countries does no good. It always goes to the government and gets wasted on mansions and beautiful cars and beautiful women. But if you educate these people and they can go back to their countries or send money back to their countries to help their countries, that's a great thing.
Yeah, it's like the saying goes, right? You can give somebody, you can give somebody a fish, right? Or you can teach them how to fish.
That's right.
And
we've been giving people fish for a long time, and the world's just as messed up as it was 100 years ago.
Absolutely. We're giving away billions and trillions of dollars right this year alone, right? And it's really bad.
And you guys are gonna pay for it. You're gonna be paying $6 a gallon for gas.
Yeah,
and
I am right now.
I don't care. I can afford it. But this is the sad thing. The people who want to change the world, who are young like you guys, are the victims of when the world changes badly. The Cultural Revolution would be an example of that. The revolution in Cuba is another example of that. So remember that when you go out into the streets and want to beat up people and knock people down and burn up their businesses, those are places you could have got a job.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
We live in a crazy world, and it's just going to continue to be crazy just because of the way information is.
Absolutely. And I think that it becomes harder and harder. I'm not a technical person. It becomes harder and harder for those people my age to keep up with that information. I try, but it's impossible. And you'll find that as time passes, you'll be left behind also, because the curve on information is so steep that even you guys won't be able to keep up with it. It'll be the 5-year-olds that'll be way ahead of you. When you're 30, the 5-year-olds will be wearing chips in their wrists and all kinds of crazy stuff.
Craziness. So our goal is to work hard. And so eventually we're able to, live and abide by that sustenance, so we can actually survive in California, because California is beautiful, right?
Absolutely.
So our goal is to work hard now. We're 2021. We're all graduated, and, we're busting ass. And so we're going to continue doing that, so we don't have to fall behind, right?
That's right. I can't remember. It's the No Debt guy on the radio. He says, work hard and save your money now so you can help people later.
Yeah, definitely. RC, you've been very insightful, and I'm sure our viewers loved your insight here. So thank you for that. Just to let you know, we're actually talking about this last month. We're planning on doing one trip a month. So 3-4 days. We're all fortunate enough to have remote jobs. And so we're planning on doing either, a place within the States or going to Costa Rica, because 4 hours away, just going to check stuff out, because, we're young and I mean, ideally we want to travel throughout life, but why not now? We can save a buck and then we can always travel.
That's right. And you do it now, you'll learn valuable lessons that will help you moving forward.
I'm
off to Portugal in September. I haven't been there before. I'm off to Iran in 2023, probably. As you see behind me, I have lots of masks from Africa and different countries. This is what we collect in our travels. And take every opportunity you can to travel and to learn. It will make you a much smarter and wiser person, even if other people won't listen to you.
Very fair. Well, thank you for that, RC. Really appreciate it. If you want to plug any of your books or your website, please do now.
Come to cowboyproductions52.com. The first chapters of all my books are there. I have true stories of my upbringing and adventures as a youngster. And I have a little bit of commentary, not very much, because who cares about what I think. But I have a lot of travel stories and photographs. So if you can't go someplace, come on my website, look at the pictures, and enjoy it. I just want people to enjoy travel. And my main crux is to stimulate people to travel and learn some things from other cultures. And do send me a link so I can put this up on my website.
Absolutely.
And I wish you luck in your endeavors.
Much appreciated.